Hi, welcome to this how to do video on the Chainformation checklist module. The first thing you need to do before you can start using your checklist is to make sure you have the right application settings and the settings for the different roles in your platform. So what you need to do first is to go to the module Our Organization. You select Roles, and then you select those roles that you know should be involved somehow in the checklist module, either by being a role that should perform checklists or a role that should have access to reports from checklists. So regardless which role, you need to edit the role like this, and you need to check rights, and you scroll down here. And then you need to make sure that this role has any of these three settings correct. So the first thing is, should this role be allowed to fill out checklists on a local basis, meaning that should they be allowed to work with checklists on the local restaurant or the store? If they should only be allowed to fill them out, you should select right, like this. If they should be allowed to create local checklists, so if you would like to have your restaurant manager be able to build and share local checklists, they should have share on checklist local. Administrate means that they would be allowed to create templates for local checklists. That means that this will be allowed to create and share checklists for all restaurants or stores in the area where the role or the user belongs to. You will also have some tips and tricks here on the information point. And then you select, should these role have access to only local reports, meaning they would have access to reports for their own restaurant or restaurants? Is it a central report, meaning that they would be able to see reports for all the sites, all the stores in that area in which they belong? Or it's a global level, meaning that you can see reports for all checklists at all levels, all markets, all countries. So these settings you need to define for each of the different roles you have in the system. To create a checklist, you go into the module checklists. In this case, we have a few checklists already up and running, so that you will see a list of all the available checklists you have. Now, there's one thing to remember, that you can only create and edit checklists in the desktop version. So in the app or in the mobile device, you can only use checklists and see reports, but you cannot create or edit checklist content. It's too complicated, too many things to fit in such a small window. So editing is restricted to the bigger. So to create a new checklist, you click on the plus sign in the upper right hand corner. Now let's say that we are creating a recurring checklist. That means that it's a checklist which we will have to be automatically recurring based on a schedule. You need to give your checklist a clear and very describing name, something which we recommend also contains the period of which the checklist is running. Something like this. You could create a new checklist based on a previously saved template. This means that you will have all the preset check items loaded into the checklist, and then you can easily edit that and save it as a new checklist. If you want to, you can add an extra description of your checklist for clarification purposes. Next thing is to create the settings, the sharing settings. You can decide, should your checklist be available altogether over a strict period of time, or should it be a continuous checklist? Continuous means that the system will keep on pushing the checklist until you either pause it or close it down. Or you can set a time-limited scope with a start date and an end date. Next thing is to decide whether this is a recurring checklist on a schedule or a one-time checklist. This case is about creating a recurring checklist. So we need to set the repeat frequency. If your repeat frequency is anything less than a week, you choose daily. For any other settings, it's a monthly setting. So even though you want to have the checklist to go once every week, you choose a daily checklist. Next step is to select which days of the week should this checklist be available. So you can select any day you want or all day of the week. In this case, it will be a Monday through Sunday checklist, 7 days a week. Should you have very different tasks on Wednesdays, you need to untick Wednesdays and then create a separate Wednesday checklist, because you cannot have separate single checkpoint items on separate days. It's the checklist itself which is ideal. Now we want to have a 7-day-a-week checklist. Next step is to decide, set the start date. Which time of the day will the checklist go active? At this time, the system will also push a push notification through the app, and it will post a notification in the web application in the desktop version. In this case, we want to have this cleaning checklist to be pushed out and available from 7 o'clock in the morning. And make note that the system now also takes in consideration if you have stores or restaurants in other time zones. It will be 7 o'clock in the morning local time for each store you have. So the system will take care of that automatically. You could also set a checklist to recur several times a day. So if we do like this checklist will be renewed and republished 7 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 9 o'clock in the evening. The tightest schedule you can have is a new checklist every hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's possible, but not recommendable. Next, we set a remind time. So in this case, we want to have the checklist to start at 7. It has a deadline for 10 o'clock, and we want to have a reminder pushed at 9 o'clock in the morning. So we select 0 days, and we add 2 hours. So that would be 7 o'clock plus 2 hours, 9 o'clock. And the due time is set to 0 days and 3 hours. And the reason for these hour settings instead of time settings is to be able to mathematically calculate for the different time zones. We can also select if this checklist should be available or saved as a template. There is an add-on feature for checklists, which will be presented in a separate video, where you can enable QR codes. then QR codes means that the system will automatically generate a unique QR code for each checklist items, and staff needs to physically scan the QR code to be able to perform each single checkpoint item. And then you can also select if you want to have the report available for other users or if you want to be the sole owner of the reports. So when you have your settings done, it's next step with sharing. And this is where you define which roles should be the ones performing the checklist. Which roles should get the push notification and be able to fill out the checklist. So in this case, we want to have back of house, front of house, and for administration purposes, we also select ourselves as super admins. We select which business areas and which geographical areas, markets we want to have this in. Now this is also where you can decide, would we like to have a network-wide common checklist that all stores, all the staff from this selection will have the same checklist, but with localized answers. Or we could do like this and just select one single unit. Doing like this means that this checklist will be a local checklist only available for these roles at the Edinburgh store. So this is how you can create checklists for selected stores or restaurants, or you can go nationwide. Now the next thing is to create our checklist items. You describe the task itself. Now this is a daily cleaning checklist. So we say that this is the trash bins in toilets. So we can also type a small description to enhance and explain to the user what's expected. To further enhance this information, we could add a photo, and you have a small formatting menu up here. So this is where you can create bold, underlined, italic, and set some bullet points. If we want to add a photo as an explanation, we can just insert that either from our computer, or we can browse the file manager if we already have something uploaded, like this. And then the next thing we can decide is, do we want to set mandatory photo? So you can set mandatory photo for a checkpoint, meaning that if we select this, you have to take a picture if you select OK. You have to select a picture if you select not OK. You have to add a comment when not OK. And you can select which of these settings you want to have for each separate item. And that means that if they have not taken a picture with their mobile device, they will not be able to close the checklist, and then there will be a deviation in the report. The final thing here is a deviation notification. This means that if this item, trash bins in toilets, should be marked as not OK, you can have the system to automatically generate an immediate notification to all users in a specific role. So in this case, maybe we will have the executive team, you could have a service team or something else. they will automatically have a push notification and an email as soon as there is a not okay checkpoint. Then we just move on. We add the next item. This could be again, we can write a description as a help or a guideline, but we can also add a direct link to our standard operating procedures, our manuals, or training material by adding a link up here. We want to create a link to a page. Let's see if we can find something here. Maybe we have we want to link to this information. And what will happen then is that as the staff or the operator is doing the checklist, they can just click on that link and be directly presented with the information from the handbook or from the operating procedures you have already documented. And this is a great help for staff that's new on the job. Then we just move on with all the different tasks. If you want to change the position, it's drag and drop. You can just move these around. And you move on to build your checklist like this. And when you're done, you click Save. And this means that your checklist is now live and will go on the air tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning as the first iteration. In this list overview, you can choose the filter all available checklists, and you will have green meaning that the checklists are all okay. Red means that they are offline for the time being. And gray means that it's actually a brand new checklist which haven't yet been published at all. You can filter out your own checklists, which you are the owner of. You can filter out checklists which are past deadline. You can filter out any checklists that are currently available, which they have not yet reached deadline of today. And if you have checklists which are actually on hold or in your archive, like non-current. Up here you can select to go to your templates, checklist templates. You can also create a new checklist template by clicking on the plus. And you can select to go to your reports. That will be explained later on. In the checklist view, you also have access to different settings for each checklist. You can set the checklist as not applicable. If you're the super admin, you don't want to have the push reminders, then you can set a checklist to not applicable. You will not have that checklist pushed to you anymore. You can disable mobile notifications. You can move directly to the checklist report. You can save any existing checklist. You can save as a template at any time. You can go directly to edit the checklist. You can clear out all the responses and set everything to 0. And you can delete the entire checklist and all the corresponding data and answers by clicking delete here.